to the last drop. Are you gonna blow your head off? Take good aim and don't forget to duck. A life sucks every Monday and all the way to Sunday, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't care how you're doing, what's up or how's it hanging. I'd like to buy this world one last drink. And life sucks all of the time, stick it up your sunshine, and then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day.
Hey everybody, this is The Crazy Life. No Jen this week, but I'm here and I'm joined by everyone's favorite guest host of ours, Henno.
Howdy.
Our favorite guest host, the only other host we've had on the show. Yeah.
I stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yes.
My own shoulders.
Yeah. I hide behind the giants. I'm that guy in the movies that was always, the little squeaky dude in the back that's like, yeah, behind all the muscle, Like, you tell him.
You can do it.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Although I'm not sure I enjoy being compared to Rob Schneider, but...
You might,
Nah, what am I saying? I'd take his money, but...
Yeah,
that's about it. I'm not sure I want to be in Adam Sandler movies at this point in his career.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so how you been since we talked to you ages ago? I don't remember the episode, but...
Doing well. Yeah, it's been a good summer, so...
Yeah?
Well, it's been...
I was going to say, here's a quick question for you. The last time you were on, you and I talked about, not finishing things.
Oh, yeah.
So, where is the album since last time?
All tracks are recorded.
Right?
So yes.
Major win on that.
Yeah.
Not even a little victory. That's a major victory there.
Yeah, a few weeks ago I got the last of the tracks recorded, and the last couple weeks I've actually been reconfiguring the studio for mixing. So,
okay.
That's, if it weren't for, I'm on, this is my third podcast this week. I'll probably do a double header with Angela tomorrow, and then there's the 24-hour podcast this weekend. So I'm like, yeah, mixing will start next week.
yeah, that's probably a good idea.
But yeah, it's really happening, and I had a little jam session with my drummer and Dave, and we were sitting there afterwards, and I think they just kind of given up, and I was just like, hey, by the way, this is where we're at, and he's just like, yes, so, and I really thought, okay, well, let's see what I can get done, by Thanksgiving. So
sure, that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean, you've gotten to this point. How long does mixing usually take for you? I know obviously as putting the album together is taking you 40 years or so.
Yeah, insert perfectionist.
Right. So, but how long does mixing usually take you?
Everything is so far along that I can honestly spend 3 nights on a song, but with the music I've done for podcasts, so pretty much every little ditty I've done for a podcast, my goal has been write, record, mix, 5 hours.
Okay.
Whatever's, and so I've been setting these, and I've been doing that, and I've been being pretty consistent with it. So I'm practicing, and I'm like, now I just need to apply the same, workflow idea to the mix.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Sure.
All right, I got tonight. I'm going to get done what I get done. I'll give it a listen the next day to make sure there's nothing obnoxious.
Sure. Yeah, give yourself some space between it also to, because that way you don't fall in love and or fall in hate with, however you want to word that, with something. Because I know, doing art, it was easy to do when you spend 5 or 6 hours or longer on something, and you're just like, this is awful, and you walk away from it. You come back the next day, and you're like, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe I got to clean this or this up, but it's not as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah. But I could sit there and say, as far as a time goes, like from the moment that all the tracks are done, and because there's with anything else, there's a lot of with podcasts, there's cleaning up, there's editing, there's adding this and that. I mean, it can be 8 hours a song.
Yeah.
When it's all said and done.
Now, out of curiosity, because of spending as much, well, it isn't so much that you spend a ton of time recording as it is, there was a lot of time between recording, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because I was going to say, does doing space, like, I wondered this too. It was like, how, and, forgive the comparison, but with Guns N' Roses, like the Chinese Conspiracy took like 1,000 years to come out. And everybody was like, with Dr. Dre finally dropping another album, it was everybody was like, this should be fire. Like, if this is not like the greatest thing these guys have done, what have you been doing with your lives? And I'm not saying that about you, but it's more of did the time give you, like, do you kind of edit on the fly, I guess is the word I'm looking for? Like, the more podcasts you do, how in your head you can kind of do stuff to correct it right during the show almost. Like, can you do that with your music too?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. It's a classic double-edged sword. It's like you get better at picking stuff up so you can be more efficient. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I start learning skills that now I feel like I need to apply them to everything.
Okay, so that's the perfectionist part, right?
That's the other part of it, where it's like, in the meantime, like, I've learned all these different ways of doing things, and now because this has taken so much time, I may have used a certain technique a year ago to do to achieve something, and now I've got some new idea.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Which is a problem.
Yeah, right. I can see that though, because I was kind of wondering about, because like when you're recording, sometimes like we're recording a show. And like when we did the Salty Language a few weeks ago from Tony's Cabin, we did. The whole time I could hear things like on the table, like anytime anyone moved on the table, or I could hear this, or I could hear like like my ear is listening for those things. Even though I don't do a lot of editing, there's certain things that I listen for because we try to just avoid them during the show. Because sometimes things could get obnoxious enough that you're like, okay, I need to go take care of that, And then there's sometimes you can't help it. Like anytime during that episode, like the toothy horse, as we called it, Tony's dog ran around. You can't edit that out because we're right in the middle of talking. So we'd actually have to cut the dialogue basically to clean that because of how we were recording it, But that's kind of what I was wondering is if, like, you can... certain things that might give you noise that you hate, can you like avoid that? That makes sense. But I could see that though, using a different technique now than you did then, and maybe like, has that at any point been like, oh, why did I do it that way?
Well, here's the thing is, because we have some tracks that we did, it's been a few years now. Mm-hmm. It was in my old studio, and then Dave got a new drum set, and then we recorded. Oh. We just had two songs that they just didn't work. They needed to be redone.
Okay,
so we redid them. Well, we did them in a new studio. In the meantime, I'd gotten better at miking, and so the drums sound completely different.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah.
And then and in the end, those are actually different. So we're going to actually have 3 sessions that have to get combined. So that's my challenge.
Wow.
Is to get them close as I can, and then we're just going to have to spend some money on a good mastering engineer.
Okay.
To put it together, because they're the ones that are going to try to make it have some continuity.
Right, because you like you said, you have 3 sessions, and the goal generally with an album, I'm assuming, is you want the same feel kind of on all the songs. Like not that they sound the same as far as the tune or the notes or anything, but that you don't want to feel like. Again, I'll go back to the Metallica kind of thing. It's like you don't want one to be Garage Inc. or not Garage Inc. Saint Anger, and then the next one is like Ride the Lightning. It's like totally different, like sounds, as far as noise level and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so, Garage was a great example, actually, of that. Since
right.
You can literally hear when they hit record on the tape.
Yeah,
because you can hear the tape hiss. Yep. It's a different deal, And this will be, it's. I'm using some samples to try to make the kick drum sound, from one song to the next, because I know albums where they went back and they recorded some songs later. I could hear it.
Yes.
You can tell.
Yeah.
You can tell that they're different, and this is the way this is going to be. And, a lot of the reason that this has taken me so long is, unfortunately, I got into this podcasting thing.
It's amazing, huh? Yeah. Yeah, see, really, that's what I say about my art, too. I was like, I don't have time for that. We do all the podcasting. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. But
I've also looked at it as like I have done more networking in the last year because it's pretty much been a year. Angela and I just did a 1-year podcasting.
Right. Yep.
And I have more connections and more networking and more. I'll be able to do more with promotion. Then we would have, before the album would have been, well, let's make 300 CDs just for our friends and family.
Right.
Well, now it's like, I'm going to put it up on iTunes and, a few people might buy some.
Why not? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And because it's just, I know I'm going to be able to go, to you and to all these different friends and say, hey, do you guys mind, letting everybody know that this is out?
Absolutely.
No pressure.
Yeah.
You don't have to play any songs, but just say, hey, Henno's finally done.
Right.
Go onto iTunes and check it out. And if you like something, download a song.
Right.
And that'll be cool. So I consider it has not been wasted time.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Yeah. Yeah, because nothing else. I mean, I know it isn't. I know, like, on Angela's Awesome Podcast, you aren't, like, it's not a music-based podcast, but it's still, like, you're still going to promote your wear on that show because why wouldn't you? Like, I can't see Angela. Yeah, I was going to say, I can't see Angela having anything against it because it's such a positive step and it's you being happy and expressing yourself. It's doing all the things that podcast is like, go do this, go be happy, do the things that make you happy, and there you go. Not to mention, I've shared
so much of it from it has a mental health aspect to me where it's clutter in my brain. It honestly is.
I imagine so. Not to mention just the completion of something. As we've talked plenty of times on here, the to-do list concepts and stuff is, you just getting it done and you get that accomplishment. And, there's all sorts of scientific proof that when you accomplish something, you get an endorphin rush. So it's, yeah. So I imagine every step in the process, you're feeling closer and closer, and you're like, all right, it's like getting your second wind in a marathon or something kind of a deal, when you've got nothing in the tank.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's been like a part of it also was I had some things I was going to do as far as mixing and equipment, and I've shared a lot about, part of my burdens is debt. And some financial stuff and I we've talked about you guys have talked about it, I've talked about it, medical stuff, taking care of those things, their costs, they're things you need to do, but I got to a point where I'm just like it's becoming actually becoming it's a burden. I don't want to, don't want to use that word. It's depressing.
Right. But, no, I know what you're saying, though. Sure, yeah.
But it's a burden, and it's something that's on my mind, and it doesn't help me with where I want to go.
Yeah.
I want to have a sense of freedom in my day. And so part of this last, 3 weeks was I've just been avoiding talking to people. You guys talked about this last week where you, all of a sudden you said, Jen, so Jen, you think about maybe going and seeing your therapist, She's like, oh yeah, doctor, heal thyself. Right. Well,
yeah.
I hadn't been going and talking to people that like my coaches and whatever when it comes to financial stuff. And just mainly because I honestly didn't want to hear the truth in some way.
Right.
I really didn't, you know.
That's actually a great point, though, because like with us talking about like moments of clarity is that sometimes moments of clarity, like I said, in my head, it's kind of, they're generally one of two things. Either they're the catalyst for change or they're a recognition of that you have changed positively or negatively, Yeah. And it's like, you didn't, you know where you're at, and really going to see that coach it's like, the point of that is to be the catalyst of change because they're supposed to wake you up and go, hey, you need to this, and this, Yeah. Same with the therapist, like Jen with a therapist or me going, it's the same idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and I walked into the room and I basically just, and I haven't gone because I haven't had anything good to say. And so I walked in and here's people that I can basically express myself honestly with. And I just said, all right, everything sucks right now. I mean, it just does. And it's hard and I'm not letting it get me down. I still have a good attitude and stuff, but I'm in a holding pattern and it's going to take a while before it clears. And
it's really frustrating to just spin your tires in life. Or feel like you're spinning your tires, whether you really are or not, but it feels like it a lot of times.
Yeah.
Paying minimum payments on your debts, and you're like, I know I'm not. It's like, I actually know I'm going backwards doing that, and
Yeah,
Been
and
there.
then and what was weird is I noticed that it was kind of like all of a sudden my visions for myself a bunch of years down the line weren't even in the forefront anymore. I wasn't even thinking about it because I was so absorbed in where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
And I like to have, I'm not a type of a person that says every year, oh, I'm going to do this, 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 and this.
Yeah, like you're not a New Year's resolution kind of guy, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't, I know people that do vision boards and all that kind of
Sure.
stuff, like where they want to see it, and I get that. But
Sure.
one
Yeah,
thing
if that works for you, great. But I'm the
Yeah.
same way. That stuff never did anything for me. Honestly, what that stuff always did to me was put an unnecessary pressure on myself.
Exactly.
And not in a good way. Sometimes you can use that pressure and motivate. For people like that, that's fantastic. For me, it just becomes extra weight on my shoulders. And like I talked last week, with like plates of like weight plates on your shoulders. And it's like that just adds more on there because at the end of the year, well, if I didn't do this, this, and this, I'm going to go, well, I failed. And that's no good. You're sabotaging yourself from the beginning for someone like me, Yeah,
exactly.
Some people can work with that.
Yeah, and now Sharon and I go to we have our thing. We want to go to Maui every year, and it's something I can look forward to.
Yep.
And it's something that we can do together. And it's like, and I thought, hey, it'd be great. Why don't I work for a long-term goal of maybe buying a condo there?
Yeah.
Someday. And all of a sudden, all of those were gone, and I'm like, well, that sucks. Now I'm a slave to my debt. Really.
Yes.
And so I lay all this stuff out in front of everybody. And, we have some good conversations back and forth. And I walk out of there and I go, it was like, moment of clarity. Just like, okay, well, how much do I need some of this stuff? Do I really need it? And so I went home and I did, because now it's time to do some actual work. You got to chop wood and carry water, and I got down and I started looking at everything and I said, you know what? I don't need this. Because once again, I looked at, hey, I'm happy with the way all the little tunes I've done for podcasts, I'm happy with the way they sound. They sound good to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, so if the album sounds that good, why do I need all this extra stuff? Because, it's so easy when you have a technical feel to get into that.
Geez.
Well, the grass is, I'm going to be better when I have this piece of equipment.
Totally, Art's the same way. And it's like, well, if I have these markers or if I buy these paints or, that's a cool technique. I should go get that stuff. And it's like, are you actually going to do anything with it? Or I own a lot of art supplies. Like, I own thousands and thousands of dollars of art supplies that are just sitting in a chest that are just sitting there basically taunting me on a daily basis. I'm looking to my right because that's where it's at. And it's just taunting me on a daily basis. Like, why aren't you using us? You paid $50 for these markers. Why are you not using them? So I totally get you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've all fallen into that trap, and I finally went, you know what, I should be. And it's a confidence thing, It was a lack of confidence. Oh well, I need some stuff to make it sound more professional. And it's like, no, I just need me and to do the best that I can, and that's going to be good enough. No one's going to knock me on it ever. And so I sold a bunch of stuff, and everything got sold last weekend, and all of a sudden I felt this lightness, and people, money's in there. I was able to pay off some of the dental bills. I was able to pay off something. I was able to upgrade some of my own equipment, so I took care of myself as well.
Right, which that's always important too. Like you see people get money and then they'll buy a new TV and someone else is like, with all the debt you have, you should have. And it's like, no, you know what? Sometimes you got to do that stuff. You've got to put a little, my brother sells stuff on eBay. That's how he makes his money. And every year he's like, I'm doing this and I'm making this money. And I'm like, dude, you've wanted a new TV for like 5 years and you haven't got one. You've wanted a couple, and I name a few things. And I'm like, do one of these things. Go do something for yourself with otherwise, why are you working so hard? Why are you killing yourself doing all this stuff, but you're not giving yourself any of that reward from it? And it's like, I understand a lot of people are like, it's not financially responsible and blah. And it's like, look, I could kill over dead tomorrow. So I'm not saying I should go out and blow all my money, but at the same time, if you want it, like your trip to Maui, let's say it was like, well, we probably shouldn't. And it's like, no, you probably should because that means so much to you. It's relaxing. That's so important to your overall year, because you look forward to that part. And in your head, you absorb some of the negativity at work because you're like, I'm working for Maui kind of a thing, or you know what I mean? So if you take that away, you're going to resent that work then. And it's like just, I'm not, like I said, if you get a couple grand back from the government for taxes, I'm not saying go buy a $2,000 TV, But if you want a new TV, maybe get a TV. I mean, obviously, unless you have, like, certain things you should take care of, like children or, like, don't make sure that necessities are met at least. Like, rent is paid or something. But, I think you got to reward yourself, too,
Yeah, if you don't treat yourself, and I know this for myself, if I don't treat myself with something, then I'm going to be resentful of it, miserable about it, and I'm more likely to do something, more impulsive.
Yes.
And buy something I really don't need.
Yeah.
Or go spend money on something I really don't want.
Yeah.
And so it's I understand the idea of it, and I'm glad I did it, and it felt good. And this week, like when you brought up the idea of talking about, moments of joy or whatever, and like right now I'm in this overall feeling of well-being. Like I just feel good.
Which is awesome.
And because I did, it's amazing how these little things that we put off, how they build up in us. And I think they honestly block some of our capacity for joy.
Yeah.
Like until I move that old stuff out of my brain, I'm not giving the space for new stuff to come in.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
kind of replace it.
That's why I kind of said, like, when I made a comment about, during the, like 2 weeks ago when the moment of clarity thing first came up before we did the show on it, when I mentioned it about how I got my clarity from all the years of dealing with my depression, that like the reason I have clarity about like why it is the way it is, and I feel I understand myself the way that I do is because I've put a lot of work into seeing why I tick, basically, if that makes sense. Not in a self-help truly kind of way, because now it finally is paying off, essentially. But all those other years, really all I was doing was just nitpicking myself. But now I'm using that power for good, if you will. Because I'm going to and I'm telling my therapist that, and then that's going to give her a picture of what she can do to help me with this. And, you're right, because what's happened is over the years I've been so inside my own head that basically the way I saw it was that I was fighting in my head. I was fighting the depression in my head. That's what knowledge is power. I'm using that power. I will beat this. And really all I was doing was giving the depression the power and allowing it to imprison me all of this time. So you're right. It, like, for me, it built up like crazy, and now it's like it's a fullness in my head in a bad way. I don't feel like I've said it a couple episodes ago, I think, where I was like, I don't feel like there's room for hope. But then I was like, after going through therapy and stuff, I kind of feel like there is, because some of that negativity is getting pulled out of my head.
Well, it's like this. So Well, I talk about this a lot in recovery is for years I thought self-knowledge was that's my kind of my cure. That's what's going to help me, right?
Yep, me too. Yep.
And what I realized, it was a crutch, because why would I seek any other help? I know everything.
Exactly, yeah.
It's
so narcissistic.
Everything.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Like, why do I need to go see a counselor? Yeah. Why do I need to talk to anybody? I've studied the hell out of this.
Exactly. Yep.
Nobody has anything more to offer me.
Yeah.
And then,
it really does. It feels like you're going to go in and be like, oh, this, and this. And they're going to go, wow, it sounds like you already know everything. And they'll just hand you their diploma and you'll,
I had a surgeon do that to me, and I loved this guy. I mean, he was so arrogant, and it was just perfect. It was my physical therapist was a riot. If you have to have surgery, I say make sure that your surgeon is just overly self-confident and arrogant, and make sure your physical therapist has the best sense of humor ever. Because we would have so much fun in physical therapy, but she wanted to advance me. And so she said, hey, talk to the doctor about getting advanced. And I said, so my therapist asked if we should do da-da-da, this and this and this. And he goes, no. And I go, well, why? And he says, turn around and look at all those things on the wall. That's why. And I was like, fair enough.
Right? That's the thing. And that's why it's really funny, because, listening to you and Angela talk about on Angela's Awesome Podcast, like when you talked about how when you first went to therapy and she was talking about the feng shui expert, about how you went in kind of like, well, this is how it's going to be. And they were kind of like, not so fast, kind of a thing. I used that and went the opposite way, going, well, I'm going to go in with no expectations. Well, when I sat down with my therapist and she's like, well, what do you want to do? What do you want from this? And I'm like, oh. And she's like, well, I need to know this because I can't help you toward a goal if you don't have a goal. And I was like, okay. So I was like, all right. And, and like I said on the show last week, I think I have a questionnaire I have to fill out. That's the point of it, is to give her, what I want from therapy, And it was just kind of funny because I was like, okay, I did what a lot of people do. You hear one thing and go, oh, that sounds bad. You go the polar opposite of it, and that's just as bad. As I talked last week, being too super happy all the time, I don't necessarily think is a good thing. Same as being negative is not a good thing. There's elements of why we have both normally. Well, I ain't normal, but that's why our brain usually has elements of both. And same with this. I was like, well, I'm not going to go. I'm going to learn from what you guys did, and I'm not going to go in and, And then I was like, oh, actually, I should have had an element of that.
Yeah.
Maybe not an expectation, but at least going, well, this is what I'm hoping to get out of this. And so
I think a lot of it, though, is there's nothing wrong with what you want out of it. It's the problem, at least for me, my experience was, is when I figured that I was going to self-prescribe or self-medicate, or not looking at the right word, but I'm going to pick and choose which parts of what somebody suggests I should do.
Absolutely.
And do the parts that I think feel that right.
Yeah.
Go
ahead. Sorry.
And I realized that and every time I've wanted to do that, or I went in thinking I'm going to do that, and it turned out that I just needed to go whole hog and do, open myself up, because it's like, then what did I walk in here for? And I did that with, my therapy lasted it pretty much a year. And, and I went in with that whole, I honestly thought about all the problems, and I've shared, let's talk about your drinking. But what's wild is, in the end, when it was all said and done, it was just about it actually had been like 9 months, and I was starting to get the feeling like we were kind of done.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to be the one to say anything, because I was doing once a week, an hour every week.
And that's the thing. My therapist actually said that to me when she was like, there is no timetable on this. She's like, when you feel we're done, basically. And she's like, I'll tell you if I think we've kind of hit a plateau, if you will, or this is as far as I can take you. She's like, I'll tell you that, but she's like, if you feel like you aren't getting anything out of this, she's like, then we're done. And she's like, maybe you would need to go to someone else, or there's other elements, but at least that technique or whatever, so, basically telling me that it's like, don't just coast through this. Pay attention, make sure you're understanding what's going on. And because really the first step of therapy, the reason it's so hard for so many people is it's giving up control. It's an element of letting go. Like you talked about that, I believe, on Angela's awesome podcast. It's been a little bit ago, I think, where you talked about surrendering. I believe it was what the term you used, and it's so hard to do, and because controlling is how I've air quote won over the years. Yeah, that's how you've survived. That's how you've gotten by. And there's what it is, at least for myself, I know it's there's a certain sense of comfort in that. Yep. Because it's like I've said before, I've honed these character defects to a fine edge. And they're and I like them. I'm not ready to just let them go. Yep. I'm not, these have worked for me really well. Right. It's the devil versus who you maybe should be or would actually really like to be. Is the devil you don't know. And it's like, I know everything. Like, I'm comfortable. I know my restrictions. I know where the walls are. I'm good. Yeah. And until you have that experience of coming out the other side and going, oh, wow, this actually worked. Yeah. You don't have any reference point to say that, okay, it does work when I let go. Yeah. And so what was wild is my last – it was like we were like the last 3 sessions, and I didn't want to say anything. And she actually brought it up. Terry brought it up with me, and she said, do you really think, you need to come back? And I was like, well, I've been wanting to ask you. And she goes, I know you've got your alcohol problems handled right now, because she was the one that, sent me in the right direction on that. Yeah. Got me in touch with the right people. I was exactly where I needed to be. But she says –
You know, the one thing that makes where I see more people come back into this room and they've they've been drinking is their codependency.
Yeah.
And she says, and she says, that's the thing that you need to be aware of, because in the process of her getting to know me, she saw that was one of my big isms.
Yeah.
Is I have huge codependency, and it was a problem with a lot of my relationships. And then she had this last word to me, and she said, and don't date the divorcee that you met last week. Which I did not take her advice.
Now, was she right or wrong on that?
Well, for 3 years, I was going to go back in there and tell her how she was wrong. But now I have to tell her she was 100% right. And if I ever run into her, I will tell her that. But the reality is I needed to go out now and live a little. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the greatest thing is she basically said, and she left it with, hey, anytime you need to come back for whatever it is, come on in, set an appointment, we can touch base again. And with what I've realized with anything that's involved with my recovery and working on me, basically, and me being a better person, me being the person that I'd like to be, there's a certain amount where you gotta, like I said before, chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
But then you have to actually take it out there and practice it. Mm-hmm. You've done the work. Now I have to go out and practice it for a while, and I have to see how it works.
Yeah.
And if it works,
and you may have to adjust. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, and if I win, well, now what's next? Well, now you chop more wood and carry more wood. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah,
it's a never ending thing, but it's taken me years to realize it. Like there's stuff now. I mean, my way of life changed 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. There's stuff that within the last year where things have become like intuitive to me.
Yeah.
Where I'm not sticking I'm not screwing up in some way and then having to go back and figure out what did I do wrong? How do I change this? How do I, I don't like, there's literally, it's almost like I have this, and I was sharing with some friends this tonight. I get these moments now where it's like I'm almost having an out of body experience, and like, or I see a vision of like, oh wait, this is how you're supposed to do it. Like
when you started, I was thinking like spider sense is what I was thinking.
Well, it's almost like that.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Like
you're like, wait, this is a bad idea.
Yeah, and it's like I can, but I'm instead of seeing the wrong pathway, because that was how I used to have to do it. Is okay, play out the tape how this used to go.
Yeah.
Now it's like I see the right way. And it's been wild, and it's taken me, and it's only been the last like couple years where something will happen in a relationship or whatever it is, and I go, and it's like it's like something clicks in my head and says, oh yeah, follow. It's like muscle memory. Mm-hmm. Like I've done the practice.
Yeah, right.
And now, but it took a long time to get to that point.
Yeah.
And then like when you brought up this idea of joy, those are now my real moments of joy.
Yeah.
I mean. My moments of joy way back when used to be external. It was, I loved the idea of falling in love.
Right.
I loved the something at a concert or blah, blah, blah. And now for me, it's when it's internal. Like it's more like those moments of clarity have become my real joy. It's like, wow, you mean I've actually learned to do something different?
Yep. See, that's what that was the other end of it. Like I said, either a catalyst for change or a recognition of that you have changed. Like you're seeing that, and that's such a great thing. Like, especially when you see that you've changed in a positive manner and you have that aha moment or that moment of clarity, and you're like, this is working. Like the therapy worked, the work I've put in is paying off now. And it's like, all right, it's got to be similar to like, an athlete getting drafted. Like they put in this work and they work hard and they do all this, and then finally on draft day, they know they're getting like, I mean, I know it's a financial thing at that point, but it's like, I can do that. Like it's all paid off. Now I can not relax. You still got to go work hard, but you can at least enjoy that hard work you've put in for 10 years,
Well, yeah, you have like you were talking about that moment of accomplishment. You've achieved something that's going to springboard you to more. Because, I mean, I don't know about you, but I spent a lot of years looking at the mirror, calling myself a lot of names.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I still do it. I'll openly admit, I still do it. And I've tried so hard to stop, but I do it almost every time I look in the mirror.
That inner, and that monologue in my head as I drive home, and I'm just berating myself for something I did or said, and to finally be getting to that point where I'm not saying it.
Yeah.
To begin with, or I'm not doing the action, that is huge. I mean, it is not easy when we've been in a certain pattern for so long.
Oh, yeah. I even told somebody, you know how, like, and I'll use my nephew kind of as a parallel to this, is that my nephew, was it about a year-ish ago, had stomach bypass surgery because he was a large dude. You know, I think he was, God, what was he, about 470 when he went in, right? He weighs, he's pretty sure he's under 200 pounds now. Like, he's like $190, $180, somewhere in that range, you know? So he's lost, like, half of his, you know, body.
Damn, yeah.
And, you know, he's like, it's weird because in my head I still see myself as that guy. He's like, but I also look in the mirror and go, I'm not that guy anymore, you know? And I was like, seriously, at this point, like, if someone could snap their fingers and, okay, we're going to take away the depression. Like, you're just going to be able to function. Like, no, you know, live in the moment. Just what, again, normal people do for, you know, whatever. Where someone just snapped their fingers and I could do it, I wouldn't know what the hell to do. I seriously would be like, it's almost, and I don't want this to be taken lightly, but it's got to be like the coming out of prison after 25 years. Like, I don't know what to do with myself. I have really no idea how to go experience things. That's what the therapy is for, is to help you slowly readapt yourself and reacclimate yourself to the world. But it's like, I actually was thinking about it yesterday, and I was like, you know, if I, you know, I know you're never going to actually get rid of the depression, but if I got to a point where that was under control, I don't even know what, like, I don't know what I would do first, I guess, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what would be my first, like, all right, I can do this now, I'm going to go do this, you know, like, I don't even know what it would be, because I'm 37 years old, and I have no idea at all what I want to do with my life, you know? And that's really scary, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, incredibly scary that I am, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I just told you I'm having a midlife crisis, you know? But it's because I've been such a prisoner of my own head for the last, especially 12-ish years. But, you know, like I said, I've been dealing with this since, you know, I was, you know, like I said, probably 12 or so, 12 or 13, you know, it was junior high school when it started. So, you know, that I remember it starting, we'll say. So.
Yeah. And so how has been the visits lately with the counselor?
I'm going every other week.
Okay.
She asked me if I wanted to go every week or every other week. And I told her, I was like, I'll be honest, I don't do much. So going every week, aside from it just being a reason to get up and get out, which there's nothing wrong with that.
That's your point, though.
But I was like, I kind of would rather bank a little bit so we can talk. And I feel like we can kind of get a little depth to it by me bringing 2 weeks worth of life to you. Plus, I knew that, you know, I was going to be going out of town, you know, this coming weekend. And I was like, and my next appointment is Monday. So then I can go in and say, well, here's how my anxiety and depression worked through that. And then that gives her another example of me in public with a lot of people, because, you know, the one thing's a festival. So, you know, that can be anxiety inducing and all that. So it gives her an opportunity to kind of see, or, well, she can see how I describe it and see how tense I get while describing it.
Yeah.
Because she pointed out to me last time about how she visually saw me tensing up.
Saw you really, wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
that's what I loved about
And I know therapist. I do it. You know, that's why I started, and we talked on this show about the breathing exercises, because I can feel, I can feel, like, I've said to Jen before, that I could actually feel, like, the anxiety rising in me, almost like I was a thermometer, you know, and it was, you could feel it going up your body. And so, yeah, you feel just everything just clenching up, you know, and so when I feel that, I start the breathing exercises to try to get myself out of that, you know, to focus on the breathing so that I'm not focusing on the anxiety and the negativity. And, you know, but once you start getting into it, it's hard to pull yourself back out. But, yeah. But you were saying, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just curious how that was.
Well, no, you were saying about, like, with like that you know, that's what you loved about.
Oh, yeah. There's the body language. Mm-hmm. It was weird. I started to become aware of my I became very aware of my body language when I was asked a certain question or I started to go into a certain topic.
Like you sit there and you try not to react a certain way because you know you're going to. Do you do that?
I would start to, but then I went, this is part of the process. And and if she's half listening to me and half reading me, what difference does it make? You know? And because the best was, and the other part that I loved is when I just got called on stuff. Like when you were sharing about the last podcast about how you're used to communicating on a podcast where you give each other an opportunity to talk and whatever it is. And I learned, at that point, I was just blah, 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 blah. And so every once in a while she would be like, hit the brakes because I said something.
Right.
And I'll be like, okay, here comes the correction. You know? And it was always stunning, but it was always a moment of like, oh, yeah, wow. Yeah. It was significant.
Right. And it's funny because it's so hard because, you're sitting there in the moment and you're like, like when she says something to me once in a while and I'm like, the first time she did it and I had like an aha moment out of it was, and I'm like, man, it's amazing that she can, and it's like, no, it's not. You're in the fog of depression. You are in the thick of it. The people who are around you are in the thick of it because they only see what you allow them to see. So they aren't even seeing it completely clear. She's totally outside of it. And you're sitting here, you basically going to therapy, and I'm being totally open with her. I'm not holding stuff to the back.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, I'm totally open. And that was my only goal going in was do not hold back, answer everything. Because the more honest I am with her, the better she can help me. So I'm moving that cloud to where she can see directly in. And nobody gets that ability unless you let them. You know what I mean? So there's only a couple people probably I've ever let that far in, kind of a thing. So, but I approached it. It's like she's a doctor. That's her job, and she can't do her job unless I give her full access to this. Yeah. So,
one of the things I'm curious if you're experiencing this too is. When I finally got to a point where I was opening myself up honestly with people and whether it was coaches or, small groups or whatever it is, that I would find out that I would become more receptive to what other people were telling me after I'd kind of exposed myself a little. Like if I walked in and I just heard, if I just said something really, briefly and I heard somebody talking, like, let's say they're giving a seminar on something that was going to help me. Like I wouldn't hear it as well as when I bared my soul a little. Yeah. It was like I opened an emotional, like a little hatch, which allowed some now the two-way, Yeah. And the other one, and the other one's to ask you, have you ever felt like this weird sense of shame after sharing something?
You know what? Not in therapy, and the only reason I think this is I've been opening myself up and sharing so much of myself between this show and Salty Language now for the better part of, it's been probably about 2 years on Salty Language that, I don't know, man. Jeez, we just did 221, and it was 47 when I first mentioned it. So, I mean, it's been about 3 years then that I really started to open and kind of just as things have happened, I'm just open with it because in the hopes of helping others go, oh, wow. He's done, So I think that has made it to where in therapy, I'm just like, because as I'm telling her stuff, she's like, wow, she's like, you've opened up way easier than most people. And I'm like, well, I already kind of do it.
That's a good point.
And when I told her about having this podcast and what we talk about, she's like, that is awesome. She's like, I love that you're doing that. She's like, because it's a secondary therapy. I'm talking with someone, which is better than, talking just to, like if I was a solo podcast, having a conversation. Generally, I just read something the other day about how much more it helps people that are depressed with their therapy to actually talk to somebody than to text or email or any of that kind of stuff. So, I think it's because of the podcasting that I kind of just went in and was like, bleh,
You're kind of rehearsed already.
Yeah, basically.
In a way.
Yeah. I really did.
I got asked to tell my recovery story, or it was somebody that was supposed to do it on Saturday night wasn't able, and they were asking for volunteers. And I always throw up my hand, because it's like, it's one of those moments where it's like, hey, if somebody asks, it's just something that, my first coach kind of told me, hey, if you get asked, always volunteer.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Because I've done it enough times, and I share on podcasts, and I'm very open with all this stuff, that I'm not afraid of it. I'm good with it.
Yeah.
But when I first started, I would have this weird, like, it wasn't that I was ashamed of what I said, but I had like a weird kind of feeling afterwards, like a doubt, a self-doubt, and,
Now, see, the way I think I felt that was, if I would open up to people, what I would feel is that I just became Debbie Downer. So I'd feel guilty about that. That it's like, oh, you just brought the room down by telling your story. And I was able to get over that because, like I've said before, I was like, no, the reason that mental health sucks so much for people is the isolation. That's so awful. That feeling of no one's going to understand, I'm all alone, I feel lonely, all this. And it's like, but you're not going to feel any better if no one actually knows you feel this way. How many people have you heard in the news and stuff that they're, take their own life, and they're like, nobody had any idea. Oh, they seem perfectly happy. And it's like, that's because they didn't want you to know. They hid that from you. Probably in their head, they were protecting you from the pain and all this kind of stuff, of watching them go through it, or they don't want to be vulnerable. So I felt that guilt of just kind of bringing everyone down. So I didn't, like, all through high school, there was one person who knew about my depression. And that was the girl I was dating, like, my junior and senior year, or kind of my junior and my senior year. Nobody else. Not Tony, who's been my best friend since we were like 7 years old, didn't know. My parents didn't know. No one else. Like, or if they did, they never asked me or got confirmation from me. That kind of a thing. Like, there were a lot of people that would, hey, you should smile more, and, I got a lot of that. So people they noticed, but they didn't understand that it's like, whoa, wait a minute, maybe this guy's got, like, now occasionally you'll have somebody like that, and people will be like, is everything okay? Yeah, I get asked all the time on the internet. People are doing this stuff now to each other because a lot of us have issues. But yeah, like I said, it was that's where my guilt was, and even now I still feel it. But like I said to my therapist, I was like, I actually told somebody online, because I had somebody on Twitter send me a DM, and they were like, shut up about your depression. Nobody wants to hear it. And I was like, first of all, I'm blocking you after you get this comment. But I was like, you post about your kids all the time. Do you really think I want to hear about your children all the time? No, I don't, but it's your life. So I fully understand why you want to talk about them. Or you talk about your job or your car or whatever it is you talk about. That's your life. This is my life. I need to talk about it as part of the therapy and helping myself kind of a thing, So, yeah, that person. That's not the worst I got. The worst I got was one time I posted some depressing tweet. One of the, again, most of the time when I tweet, it isn't that I'm in a really bad place. Sometimes I just got to get thoughts out of my head. Just get rid of negativity and trying to make room for something else. And I had one guy that actually responded with, well, why don't you kill yourself already? Yeah. And I didn't even respond. I just blocked him. I was like, I'm not even going to give you what you want because you want me to respond to you.
You're just a troll.
Yep. Nope. You're out.
Yeah.
Just.
Well, and how much do you also keep stuff to yourself just because you get tired of someone trying to fix you?
Yeah.
You say something in the end because that's a natural thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure you went through that too, right? Like as you were recovering from alcoholism. Yeah. That people are, why don't you do this? Yeah, true, yeah. Yeah, because
it's like anytime, because, all right, so, like, my first year was a lot of anxiety because, like you said, like you're, like coming out of prison, right? So here I'd been in, who knows when I'd actually felt my real feelings. I numbed them all the time. So here I have them now. And they're all out there. And so my first year was a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, just, oh, man. It was bad, And
Now, here's a quick question for you. Did you avoid, especially at first, did you just straight out avoid anywhere that had alcohol? Or did you still go to bars and that kind of stuff as you were sobering up?
Yeah, I got lucky. I met a bunch of people that were complete normal drinkers, and
Okay.
they would, like when they said that they were going to go down to the local bar and watch live music and play foosball and maybe have a drink.
Yeah.
They literally went down there, watched live music, played foosball, and had a drink.
Oh, okay, okay.
I was like,
so you weren't
it
with like a
was-
bunch of boozers that were like gonna go
No.
woo and yeah, okay,
Yeah,
I get you.
Because I mean, to be honest, nobody wanted to really drink with me.
All right then.
It's
Yeah.
like you get to a point where it's like, yeah, that guy, but I'm joking a little, but it was it actually within about it was about a month and a half in where somebody asked me, hey, like they felt bad that they weren't asking me, and they're like, hey, we're down here at the Pio, do you want to come, or just, I don't want to leave you. And I'm like, oh no, I it was good. I needed to come down. And,
Yeah.
and I realized, okay, this isn't a problem. And because here's the thing is that bars for me were, I mean, I drank at home, I drank home alone because that was my thing, and
Right. Well, that's
so-
what I
so-
always wanted that, because with alcoholism, you generally will drink anywhere. Like, you don't care. A lot of people will just drink. Like you said, you drink by yourself. You drink with other people. It's not the same as the way most people perceive it is, oh, you go to the bar and drink. It's like, no, I probably do most of my drinking at home by myself.
And I've always been very social on the internet. So a lot of times I'd be just home, chatting or whatever like that. I was still having a social life. It was just not out there,
Right, okay.
Because I could be safe, and
True.
But bars were always mostly about. The only time I really went to bars was for music. That's what
Yeah.
So I never had this association really, which was good.
Yeah.
And it was great to have people around me that also were very normal. So I didn't have to have that weirdness.
You didn't have to. Yeah, you didn't have to like isolate yourself from a group of people because of the drinking. Yeah.
And it was also very helpful because, like I said, I was just such anxiety and just it was just such a hard place to be. It was nice to have somebody actually say, hey, do you want to come out and do something fun? Like because I just felt like I was out of place everywhere.
Yeah,
because I
sure.
was like a raw nerve, and to feel like I belonged.
Do you know what it was? Like, this is funny, and well, not funny. It's tragic actually. But you basically were coming out of a long-term relationship, and now you're hanging out with married people, basically, as a single person. That's essentially what you just described, because having just come out of a long-term relationship a couple of years ago, as I hang with married people, I feel so out of place at times because I'm single, so.
Yeah. Yeah, what was even worse? I found out later that because everyone knew that I was in recovery and stuff, and I was honestly trying to make an effort to not. I'd said out loud that I'd like to make friendships with women and not, everything, quit being into this, like, because when you're feeling insecure, like, well, we were talking about, this idea of joy. Like, I would find, you look for, if it wasn't booze, I was going to look for a connection with women,
Sure.
because that gives you a rush, right?
Yep.
I had this thing, you fall in love with falling in love, the excitement of meeting somebody, this and stuff. And I finally went, I need to actually stop looking at women as a tool for joy. I mean, it's kind of a harsh way of putting it, but that's how it was.
Yeah, I fully understand what you're saying, though. Yeah.
Yeah, so my goal was to actually make actual friendships with women, that had no other. Well, they had all talked about it and decided that I was off limits. So I was wondering why I wasn't even getting anything. There was a conspiracy going on.
Wow. Yeah.
Somebody told it to me on the chairlift one day. I'm like, so is that why I don't seem to get anywhere with anybody? They're like, well, you're trying to go a year without,
Yeah, it's like, you guys could have told me at least, and then at least I know where I stand and not wasting my effort and embarrassing myself.
Yeah, exactly. I already felt a little out of place, and now not even the single girls want to, talk to me
Right.
more.
Oh, man. That's enough to drive
Not
you back to
healthy.
drinking. I mean, that's, like, oh, man, I'm kind of hitting a spiral now. And,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah,
no
I
good.
think about that time, where I was so, once again burdened with uncontrolled emotions that I couldn't handle, and I think about when, I can't actually say I ever felt joy. I felt happy. I felt excited for new experiences, but it was all external and it was fleeting. They were just moments.
Well, and we talked about this, I think the first time, I think when you were on with me and Jen, I think we talked about that TV show Happy-ish, and how that word really, it sounds like you're settling, but you're not. You're actually really recognizing kind of what it is, because, it really is, when you're a teenager and younger, there's a whole romanticism to the world. Everything's a fairy tale. It's going to be great. It's going to this. And then as you get older and you start seeing, it's like, that's not how, and you're not being negative. You just go, this isn't how things work. The whole, it's, like you see, some girls as they grow up and stuff, and in their head, they're going to have the big fairy tale wedding and the guy's going to swoop in. And it's like, that isn't how, don't get me wrong. I've heard stories of people and how they
happens.
met. It happens, but it's like, it's so rare. You can't, well, you shouldn't expect that. If it happens, awesome, great. We're all happy for you. But you also have to understand that, like you said, that whole falling in love thing, it's like, that can be just as dangerous as anything, some of the other stuff. It's like, you just kind of got to recognize that, like that show said, it's like when you're in, I think it said, like in your 20s, you're the happiest you will ever be. And it's probably true, because your burdens in life generally are the lightest they will ever be. Because the older you get, you have, debt, people around you getting sick and dying. And generally when you're a teenager, you don't have to worry about, there's always that occasional tragedies and stuff. But most of the time, most people don't have to deal with a whole lot through those ages. It's, pretty much coast. All you have to do is go to school, and that's pretty much all you have to do. And then as you get older, there's that, like once you're out of college, it's like, here you go. Now you got to work. You got to deal with that. You got to deal with this and other things in life hitting you. And, so.
Life is giving you the big beat down.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
and
actually,
it isn't that you can't be happy getting older. It's just, you have to kind of change. The rules change, as we've talked before.
Yeah.
So.
All right, I'm in my mid-40s, and if I compare my mid-40s with my mid-20s, I would say that I had the highest highs, and I had some low lows in my 20s for sure.
Yeah.
But they weren't, to me, they were more fantasies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and now my highs aren't as high. I can still have some decent lows. But I feel it's consistent, and my joy is actually feels like it's real. It's in the moment. Like,
right. Well, you know what? You just described teenage love to 30-year-olds in love.
Well, yeah.
Really, in your teens and 20s, it's oh my god, and they break up with you, and it's like, oh, the world's ending. And when you're in your 30s and think you break up with somebody, like my thing, it sucks a ton. But you also go, it happens. It's like, it sucks, but that's life. Relationships don't, like, just because one ends doesn't mean that there'll never be another one, or, but when you're like 15 and you break up, ugh.
See, my codependency carried that into my 40s. So,
oh, okay, well, sorry. All right, then. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's my detachment with people.
The world was going to end, and, nothing was ever going to...
Yeah, listen, don't get me wrong. When my relationship ended, there was an element of 1 week where I got out of bed, actually for a full day once. Out of a week. Then the next week it was a little bit better, but it wasn't that I was like, oh, you know what, you got to get up, and it wasn't that. It was just I had things I had to go do. It was, and it was kind of like like after I lost my dad, it was kind of like that. It was like all I wanted to do was just lay around and feel awful, and but I had things to do. I couldn't just do that. So I was like, got up, became a zombie, and just coasted through what I had to coast through. But like I said, and now I was just, I guess some of it has to do with too, I guess, how the relationship ends. Did you expect it? How did you feel? Like, were you did it come out of nowhere and you got dumped? Did you get cheated? Those things, those elements all affected, of course, too. But like you said, codependency issues can also influence you in a different way.
Well, and that's
fairly enough, I have detachment issues, so that could fuel the way I perceive it. Because I tend to drift away from people. Yeah,
and my thing is that I think this is kind of where I'm getting at is when I start looking to external things for my joy and happiness, I start expecting more of what somebody or something can truly give me.
Yeah.
And it's unrealistic. It's a fantasy. It's not real.
Yep.
And that has been my biggest crashes, has been when I'm trying to get more out of a situation, a place, a person, a thing, more than it can reasonably give to me.
Yeah.
And, and I put these expectations on it. And so now that's why I think like those moments of clarity are my real joy, because they're internal, they're within my control, and I can typically do something like, and podcasting is one of these. Angela and I, when we get together on Fridays, I always feel so good afterwards.
Yeah.
We get together and we share and we talk, and I carry that with me.
Right.
For at least a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Where I was like, I know you've shared about like that concert you guys went to, and that just felt so great, and blah blah blah.
I rode that high for probably a week, and I think something about that, looking back at it, was I haven't really gone to concerts in a while. I used to go a lot. Tony and I used to go to a bunch of shows. We'd go hit up, the one place they had like $10 and $15 shows, and had decent bands, like fairly known bands in the '90s, for like $10 and $15. So we'd go all the time because that's affordable, and you see, and that rush of live music is awesome, and I love it to this day, but I think that had a lot to do with that show.
Yeah. Well, that's
also beer.
Sometimes, and it's also, you go and you do something with a friend. I know that makes a big difference. For me, when we went to Portland, me being there with Neil was that made that completely a different experience, because this is my lifelong friend.
Yep.
This is an opportunity. We don't see each other all that much now that we're states apart. And the experience itself was enhanced by that. And man, I carried that, that was a great experience. That's why I'm coming out to Chicago, by the way.
Right. And I'll tell you, I think it's interesting listening to all the people who went to RCCC. I think I got them all. Is how many people saw it as an exhilarating experience, and how many people seem to see it as an exhausting experience. And I don't mean in a negative way, just
no, it's just the way it is.
But we're afterwards, we're just exhausted by it, and versus the other. And I was like, that's really interesting how, how it was received by people, and I, like you said, seeing Neil and that enhanced that for you. And I think, because I could see either one. I could easily meeting that many people, being on that whole time. To me, I would probably, and in Chicago, you'll probably see it, I will probably be exhausted by the end of it. Like, physically drained, because I'll feel like I have to be on,
On, exactly. And that's, a lot of people carried a lot of expectation in.
Right.
And it might have been a little easier based on the fact that they had friends with them. I'm sure your experience is different when you're with Tony, somebody
absolutely.
that you're versus by yourself.
Yep.
The level of anxiety must change dramatically.
Oh, yeah, because you're bringing part of your safe zone with you. You're bringing part of the safe feeling with you, Like, if I went in there, like, I had a guy, there's a guy, they do, like, people on Twitter do, like, tweet-ups all the time, where groups of people who are friends on Twitter will get together and actually meet and hang out and, go to bars or whatever, and whatever else happens. And one guy lives, I forgot where it is. It's like half an hour north of here, and he was going to Toronto for one, and he was like, hey, do you want to go? He's like, if you can get to me, you can ride with me to Toronto. I've already got a room. He's like, you can either go half or whatever whatever you can do. Cause he knew I don't have much money. And the anxiety level of that man was like nuts. Now, the people I would have probably gravitated to are people I'm in a group with, and I talk to on the, like, daily basis. We've talked about a lot of stuff. We're for internet people, we're fairly and it's only a group of like 8 of us. It's a really small kit group, and I would have been meeting most of them, and I was like, there's no way, like, I cannot do it, like, I just can't do it. Now, if Tony was like, hey, let's go, I probably would have went. I still would have been super uncomfortable, but in my head, it's always Tony's there. Like, if nothing else, I can always go, over to him and just start BSing with him. I'm right back into a comfort zone kind of a thing, and So yeah, Chicago should be interesting.
Just brought up something so usually in March I go home. I go to California, and it's been something there's an annual ski trip I usually go on, which I actually haven't done in a couple of years, and then I meet friends and I hang out with people, and I go home on Thanksgiving too, but that's, there's just so much going on.
Yeah,
but in March I can sit down with people. But what's funny is after Portland, I realized that is about me being in today's moment and getting joy in today. And when I go back to California, I'm actually seeking solace in what was, in a way, I guess.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Sure. It's the reason why, when you go home and you have mom's cooking or grandma's cooking, it takes you back. And that's why it's so comfortable. It's so comforting, is it reminds you of when you were, growing up, or certain memories maybe. Like you remember being at her house while she was baking something, or, those memories that always make us all happy, Yeah,
and for some reason now, and it sounds kind of odd, I'm taking myself out of a comfort zone.
Yeah.
I'm going to meet a bunch of strangers in a place that I've never been. Now I will get to see some old friends. That's another huge positive. But I think what I'm really I'm looking to create the new memories and the new joy in my life, because at some point, my parents aren't going to be in the same house anymore.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
My sister and brother-in-law might move away, and then what? And I'd like to create new. It's kind of it's kind of just hitting me right now. I haven't really figured out what my motive has been. I know I really cherish these connections I'm making with people all over the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the upside to meeting people on the internet. And the downside can be within the same thing, like the distance of the people that you meet that you're like, man, I wish we lived closer. We'd hang out all the time. And, there's so many of the people in our podcasting group or a few others that I've met. And I'm like, man, I wish they lived closer, because I would love to just hang out with them all the time, because again, you're only getting what they give you. So you never know. But
well, that's true. Yeah.
But, they just seem like people you'd get along great with. And it's like, man, So.
Yeah. And so I want to, while it's an opportunity, I want to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I really want to do it.
Right. And mine's about pushing me out of that comfort zone, because my comfort zone is, it's a comfort zone, but it's also, a cell for me. So I have to try pushing myself outside of it at times. And, and that's a good way, like the idea of a Comic-Con is a double-edged sword, because one, I love comics. It's one of the few things I am very passionate about. But at the same time, we're not talking about a local comic convention. We're talking about one of the biggest in the country. This is a huge show. There are going to be a lot of people here, and it's Chicago. So it's a busy city. It's not a Toledo, which is it's a decent sized city, but nowhere near what Chicago is. And, just Chicago, just the tourism alone and the people living there keep that city buzzing and busy. And now you're also going to bring thousands of geeks in and, release them on the city as well. So there's that extra element that, in my head, I'm going, oh man, it's like breathe. Like I already have got such nerves about this.
You know what? All of this is something that you get to, work with your therapist beforehand.
Yep.
Put into practice maybe some new skills you've been taught or shown, or concepts or ideas.
Yeah.
And then go back to report. I mean, this is all part of the work, because that's one thing I realized is all of the recovery work I've done. And when I talk about recovery, I'm not talking about learning how to be okay without alcohol. I'm talking about learning how to change Heno, learning how to do things differently.
Right. Getting to the root of why you saw alcohol as a relief to things. It's emotional eating kind of a thing. Like, like my nephew, again, he had that surgery. Usually with that surgery, they have people go to a lot of counseling, because they want to make sure that whatever caused you, if you were an emotional eater in some way or this or that, they can help you with that. So it's the same.
But you have to take it out into the world, right?
Yes.
You can't. It's not about I'm going to sit here in my little sessions and I'm going to be fine. No, I have to go practice it. And the one place where I practice it the most is at work, because I'm with these same people probably more than I am with any other humans in my life, and I can't change my play partners or my sandbox. Right. I mean, that's that. If I want to work there, that's who I got to deal with.
Exactly.
And that's where I get to practice all the tools of acceptance and love and tolerance and keeping my, restraint of tongue and pen.
Right. Like when someone
happy.
when someone steals your hot dog, finding the wisdom in recognizing that maybe they were in a worse place than you and needed that hot dog. That was very enlightened and adult of you.
That was so freaking funny.
Yeah, because as soon as you said it, I was like, who steals someone else's lunch? And I immediately did the same thing you did. It's like, come on. Like, especially when there's enough in there for the week, it's like, it'd be different if you put a whole pack in there or something, or there were like 20 of them, and it's like,
exactly.
Like, I put 4 or 5 or whatever.
Yeah, 8 hot dogs.
Exactly.
I eat 2 a day. No, I didn't accidentally forget how many I'd eaten.
Right. It wasn't like it was Friday at closing time or something. Like some places will throw out food people have in the fridge, like the maid services or whatever, cleaning crews will throw out whatever's there at the end of the week. And it's like, no, don't throw that away. I'll eat that, kind of a thing. But yeah, I just had to bring it up. It was just funny.
It was. Well, and I love the one thing you're talking about is the interaction we've had, between shows and listening to stuff back and forth. Mm-hmm. It is just, oh man, I get so much out of it. I'm getting so much out of it.
It's funny because like you've mentioned about how there's been crossovers, and what I love at times is that usually on days that I'm going to podcast, sometimes the day before, I kind of go, I don't listen to any other shows because like with Salty Language, sometimes we'll talk pop culture and stuff. So sometimes I don't listen to other shows because I don't want to feel like I'm stealing from anybody kind of a thing, So like with Angela's Awesome Podcast, I usually wait until after we record this to listen to the new one. That way I don't feel like it's back and forth because I also sometimes I'll be like, hey, on the new one they did this, so I'll cite it, but I also don't want to but it's funny how many times just inadvertently we've had crossovers the same week and neither knew what the other was doing
exactly,
and it's just funny how that's just worked, and we approach things generally a little different because we're focusing more generally on the mental health part, and you guys do too at times. There's not, but you're about like the whole body, like, experience, so it's just interesting. It's always great. Like I love the fact that people are doing what both shows are doing. I like that there's more of them. Like as, excuse me, over the last year or so, as I paid more attention to like the health and self-help section on iTunes, there's so many more of them now. And and I've seen a decent amount of mental health ones popping up, and I'm like, I love this because that means that the more of them that there are, the more people can listen and go, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I should go get help, or I should this, and it's like that's how we fight this. That's how we do it. It's the only way because there's not a ton of budgets out there for it. There's like Toledo, I think just recently did a walk downtown to raise awareness and money for the mental health. I forgot what it is. There's can't remember I don't know if it's a charity or whatever it is, but they help people with mental health get help and such. And they were doing a walk to raise money and awareness for them. And I was like, that's awesome. That's the first one of those here I've heard of. And I was like, sweet, because you hear all the time Alzheimer's ones and breast cancer ones. And don't get me wrong, those things suck a ton also. Cancer, I believe it's like 1 in 8 people. Mental health is like 1 in 3. So I'm not saying one is better or worse than the other, but mental health affects a lot of people, and it's an ignored thing, and it always has been ignored. So I love that it's getting some attention finally, so. Real quick, going back to what you said about when you were talking about how after you do the show with Angela, you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Of the 2 shows that I do, which do you think is the most emotionally draining?
I would actually say Salty Language would be.
You're right. Yep. This one, I open myself up and just dump a lot of times, and I pull from a really dark place sometimes. Like, I'm like, this is why I'm doing, But on that show, I feel pressured almost. Even though I'm talking with Tony, and I don't feel any pressure from him, in my head, it's I've got to do this for the perceived audience. I have to be on. I have to this. I have to, even though there's no pressure, no one else puts it on me. I put it all on myself. But when him and I are done, I usually shut everything off, and I don't listen to anything. I don't put music on. I don't put the TV, nothing. I just want silence. And I am so just done. Like, I don't want any sort of a stimulation kind of a thing. I just want to be left alone. After this show, I'm usually like, man, that felt really good. Like,
I can honestly say the same thing about when I do moving the needle, or not so much moving the needle because there's so many of us on there, but like Gotham Lights and things like that, where it's more like I'm supposed to be. We're talking about entertainment stuff. Yeah. I'm supposed to be bringing my opinion and presenting myself and da-da-da. And, yeah, you're right. For some reason, when I'm just sharing about what I'm going through in life and, and we are, and here's the thing with Angela's Awesome Podcast, and just like with you guys with Crazy Life, is we are talking about the victories. We're talking about, honestly about, okay, where we slipped a little, but where we picked ourselves back up and we did better. Yeah. And they're, once again, said it a handful of times tonight, man, those are my moments of joy. They really are. They really are today.
Yeah.
You really made me think about it. When you brought it up last night, I was like, because I just listened to the Moments of Clarity, that you guys did.
Well, it's funny because last week we were going to do Moments of Joy, and it just became Moments of Clarity, and we were like, you heard it. We talked on the show, and Jen's like, let's just go with this. Like, okay.
Yeah. And you talked about, okay, happy-ish, and I'm like, you know what? Those things really overlap for me now.
Yeah.
They're really part of what makes me happy-ish is my opportunities to find self-improvement. I don't know, and I think a lot of it is because I've derived life purpose in it.
Yeah.
That no matter what, my work, one of the things I tried to lose is, a lot of my ego, because that was a lot of my issues are their self. That's
absolutely.
My sense of self was always distorted.
My issues with work, and when I found that I was always getting mad at people, was because I'm projecting my work ethic and what I feel should be done on other people. Once I was, and I said this, years ago to Jen, I was working at Hollywood Video, so this is probably 98, somewhere in that range, and I was like, you know what? I was like, I have to stop projecting my expectations on people. I can't. They aren't me. They are who they are, and they're going to behave as they behave. Now, there's nothing wrong maybe sometimes letting people know that, certain levels of how they behave are not acceptable, But at the same time, once I did that, I started getting mad at people less and less. However, I also became more of that, just get out of the way, I'll do it myself, which is no good.
It's true.
It's a mode a lot of people go into, but it's really no good, because when you do that, you're still kind of doing the same thing, because you've just told them, you can't do this as well as I think I can. Get out of the way, let me do it. That's what you've just told them. So yeah.
And I had to, because for a long time, who I was what I did for a living, and I needed to let go of that, because it took away some of that personal thing, out of it. So now it's something I have skills in. I have good opportunities to be of service just because I fix things. That's very rewarding. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, who am I? That's what I was missing, and I don't want to be my occupation.
No,
and I like being a musician. That's cool too.
Right. Now, if you were a musician and that was your occupation, it might be a little different, since it's something you're very passionate about. Yeah. Whereas when your job is not something, not that you can't be passionate about your job, but it's not the same thing. Yeah. Like the whole time I'm working at a video store and I'm in school for art stuff, and I'm like, I want to be an art. A graphic designer or an illustrator. I don't want to be a video store clerk. I don't want to be that.
Yeah, and so having the in a lot of ways, if I actually did do music of some sort for a living, it might actually be harder because you know how passions and boy,
right. Well, plus the passion can get ruined because it's work sometimes.
Exactly. And that's like when Angela asked about, she's like, "Oh, did you guys have musical differences?" And I said, "No, we had personal differences." That's just the way. I mean, it all gets personal all of a sudden because
I'm sure,
it's your passion.
Yeah.
And so what I realized is we're talking about Graphic Novice. Nicola and VF said something really, really, really kind about me this week on their show. And it absolutely stopped me in my tracks. And I went, wow, if that's how somebody views me, then that's who I want to be in my life. And it was
nice.
about this idea of if I can help people, if I can be useful to others, like, wow, what a purpose. That's why when I saw that movie tonight, I was just like, oh, God, I just want to I've gotten so used to being in this nice little happy place, and all of a sudden you showed me how horrible the world can be in this movie. I was like, ugh.
That's why Jen always said that, she always lived in essentially, I don't want to word it this way, but people will recognize the term in that ignorance is bliss. And it isn't an ignorant, it's more of a, like, she knows there's bad stuff out there, but she's like, I'm just going to kind of exist over here and be happy, and
there's and because I like the feedback I get here.
Right?
I mean, really, it's so true. And that's, what I used to think about those people? I thought they were just idiots. I really did. I thought the people that were,
same here.
Like, how can you exist? How can you exist in that? Aren't you seeing what's going on out there?
Yeah. How can you not pay attention to politics? How can you not be passionate about history so that this and then when you stop and you really start looking at things and you go, I'm getting all worked up and mad about this and everything I'm doing, and it's still doing the same thing out there. And she's over here happy. Yeah. Like, I kind of want to be that. It's one of those things, sometimes, like, you'll just see somebody, like, people look at kids, and a little kid will laugh, and you're just like, that's what you want out of life. But you can't have that anymore because they have such an ignorance to the world that whatever it is, you see videos all the time of just a baby just laughing like a maniac at something that's just mundane. But to them, it's the greatest thing ever, And I'm like, it's like it's why, when you see kids and stuff as they get older, and it's like, I hate it when you start seeing kids losing that because you're like, it's like, don't lose it that early. At least wait until you get into your 20s before you start losing that, But that innocence
it's part of us being humans. Our ego finally we start to learn who we are.
Yep,
we figure out who we are, and it changes things. And one of the it's like you can almost be too smart, and that's where I realized is where we talked about you talking about your knowledge. I've got all this figured out. I know all this. Mm-hmm. And when I share the idea of a spiritual experience, I'm really talking about when I quit thinking so much.
Yeah.
And I just started feeling it.
Yep.
And when I stopped overthinking things and stopped trying to, mentally power myself through it.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that if I, and maybe I am a little like ignorance is bliss now, but it feels good.
Yeah, right? It
really does.
I'm not going to lie. Like, for years, people would always ask me, you see those surveys online or different things, and people are like, what's your greatest fear? And I'm not, I just said that, and then I was like, the way I said that, I don't want that to sound like I was taking a swipe at Grant, by the way. Because I forgot he did that, like, mashup for the Stranger Con. So,
it was really good.
Yeah, it was. I don't want to make it in any way sound like I took a swipe at that. Because that's all. I love that question because that's a really good way to get into people's head a little bit. And I'll tell you, mine has always been that I will lose my mental faculties. That I will develop Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that, and I won't be able to be as knowledgeable. I won't be quick-witted. I won't be. It's why I put off going on an antidepressant. I was afraid that it was going to make me a zombie and dull me, and sap my creativity. Even though depression has sapped my creativity or my anxiety has, whichever, for years now. But that was always my biggest thing, because like watching my dad go through, and my dad was a quick-witted guy, and my dad was a smart guy. He wasn't like a college-educated guy, but my dad was a smart guy, And I always went to him for advice on stuff, because he just always he was one of those people, always just had a way of seeing a side of things that you're like, that makes so much sense. Kind of, he just sees through the bull in the world, kind of a deal. And watching him in his last year, he didn't lose his mind at all. Like, he was as sharp at the end as he was his whole life. And I was like, it sucked to watch him physically waste away, because my dad was never a sit-at-home on his butt kind of, he was a doer, And that sucked, because obviously, no matter what, it sucks because I lost him. But it would have been so much more painful for me to watch him lose his wit. I watched Jen's one grandma, who was a sharp-witted woman. She had dementia, and watching her, and it's an awful thing to watch. So it's always been in my head that it's like, I don't want that. Like, I've said countless times to people, I'm like, if I start getting that way, take me behind the shed and put 2 in my head. Like, done. I don't want to go through that,
Yeah.
And, like, you see the older people where, like, the husband or wife don't remember they've been married 50, 60 years, and they don't remember. It's like, oh, that's got to just kill you as the spouse. It's like, I don't want anyone to suffer like that. I'd rather you just suffered because someone took me out back and killed me than,
Yeah.
Not really, of course, but, that's always
bullet, pretty cheap.
Yeah, right. And it's like, realistically, that, or just the idea of failure has always been it was always my motivator. I don't want to be a failure. And being a failure is all in your head. It's really all in your head. You can be a success and not be a billionaire. You can be a failure and be a billionaire, because you could fail and fail and fail. I mean, and this is no political driven anything. How many times has Trump filed bankruptcy? But he's still a billionaire, like, it's like, so no matter how you want to look at it, in elements, he's been a failure and a success. So, the one doesn't mean that you can't be the other. Or Einstein, talked constantly about failures, and, that's where you learn things, is in failure. So it's fine to be a failure, because it's just do you learn from it and grow from it? And that's, but always never being enough kind of a thing, like never succeeding that way. That's always been in my head. And over the years, that monster got bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point of, kind of some mental paralysis, Yeah. So if you're out there and you think that way, try as hard as you can to run the other way.
Yeah. Where do you fall, though? Like, so big picture, you're working on stuff right now.
Mm-hmm.
You'd hope to maybe get back into doing graphic design, or, wherever it is you see yourself.
Yeah.
Let's say that doesn't happen, and you end up, doing this, sharing your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Will that give you value in your life?
Yeah.
Or do you need to have that?
The best part of podcasting for me was the first, like, when we put up on Salty Language, Tony and I did, an episode it's called Just Keep Calling, where we sat down, and for the first time, like, we didn't rehearse in any way, nothing like that. It was Tony and I sent him a text, and I was like, hey, I really want to do a show with you about my depression, and you can give your side of it. And he's like, that's a great idea. We should do this. So, like, a week or two later, we sat down and did it. And neither one of us knew what the other was going to say. And it's still a show that every once in a while I still go back to and listen to, because it helps me be really grateful for what Jeannie did in forcing Tony to keep calling me. And the fact that he still did. That he didn't go, you know what, no, and just move, give up. And that has also been a catalyst for me to be. It was a moment of clarity. That episode was such a moment of clarity that it's really, like, and I'm not, it wasn't long after that I said to either Jen or Tony that I had mentioned about maybe doing a podcast about mental health, but I just never put it into the works because anxiety, and I didn't want to do it by myself, and so. But the greatest part was we put the episode up, and I was super nervous because that's really laying it out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I got fairly bare on that episode, and and I'm like, well, let's see, like, in my head, it's like, all I'm hoping for is just no trolls, no people, just kill yourself, get over it, none of that garbage. Yeah. And I got none of that from that episode. I got a decent, like, not a ton, but I got a decent amount of emails from other podcasters and stuff that were like, wow, I didn't know that about you. One guy was like, he's like, me and my wife have been at odds for the last couple years, and listening to you guys talk really made me understand what she's going through. And he's like, and I realized I've been a jerk to her. And he's like, I am going to go be the husband I should be to her. And I'm like, wow.
Oh, wow.
I was like, I don't know that you can get much better feedback than that, right?
Yeah, I just got chills.
Yeah, like, I had a couple of people tell me that because of hearing me talk about it, that they've kept it to themselves, and they're like, I'm going to talk with my best friend about it. And I was like, awesome. That means they're establishing a support system. Perfect. Not being alone is the most important part of this disease, or mental illness, however you want to, that's the most important part. You will still feel alone, but knowing you're not alone can mean a whole lot sometimes, just that in the back of your head, that's just that little nugget of knowledge. But anyway, I know I've rambled, but that has been the most rewarding part of podcasting. I love the people I've met, but nothing has made me happier than those kind of comments going, I made a difference in someone's life. Like, even if it was just the one guy, I mean, I was like, I've made a difference. When I talked about my withdrawal on Salty Language a little bit, because it was before we were doing this show, I had people reaching out to me on Twitter going, well, how did it happen? What did you go through? Kind of, and like, they're like, I want to go off mine. And I constantly was like, go to your doctor. Don't do it the way I did. And it was like, and I kept telling people, I was like, just, I'm not an expert. Like I say at the end of every one of these shows, I'm not an expert. It's just what I went through. But it's so awesome that other people, or they've reached out and been like, I know exactly what you're going through. I've been dealing with that for years. It's, but even like talking with you, it's like you haven't gone through the same thing, but there's a lot of crossover.
So much, yeah.
Because we're both fighting a demon of some sort, and it's or have fought, however you want to word it, and it's like, so it's just great, with other people finding these things out and seeing how, or Grant, like I've had a couple talks with Grant about it, and it's the same. It's just nice that we all know, and it's like, or Oz, it's like, hey, if you ever need anything, hit me up, like Oz is, he's in a whole different time zone, so it gives you different options with people too. It's the amazing part of the internet is at any time, if you're feeling really dark, jump on Twitter and go, I'm in a bad way, can somebody talk? I've seen people do it, and I've responded to some of them and gone, like there was a woman one day that was like, I'm thinking really bad thoughts, I need help, can someone help me? Boom, I hit through a DM her way and was like, what do you need? Like, don't, and I immediately was like Googling suicide hotline number, because it's like, I can talk to you, but I'm not going to have the experience they have, it's like, but, so that's been the best part. Just like, and I know you've mentioned on Angela's Awesome podcast where you guys have gotten feedback about stuff you've said on the show, and you're like, it's just, it lifts you because you're like, I've done something. I've affected someone positively. Like, I'm not a Debbie Downer. I'm sitting here talking about a very, very, very dark subject.
Yeah.
And people are getting positivity from my dark subject. That is awesome.
Well, yeah. Because that's the thing is that the old me was so stuck in my head and in my own little existence, which was very small. I mean, it was honestly small. When you're in that place where you're just consumed, the world doesn't get very big. I mean, it really gets very tiny and dark.
Yeah.
I didn't have any of that. And so, to have that now just is like, it's just 180 degrees. And I just go, yes, this is it. This is the real joy in life.
This is why I'm doing this too. It's like, I guess, and I'm not going to get into any sort of a higher power, any of that kind of stuff here. But it's like, a lot of people believe things happen for a reason, or you're where you should be in life and all that. And it's like, whether I believe in that or not, it's irrelevant. But it's kind of like it definitely, when you have that moment, you're kind of like, you know, the fact that I've had this horrible thing to deal with for years, at least some good, it's the silver lining, at least some good came out of it. At least it wasn't just a burden that I just dealt with until it finally put me into the ground or something, you know. And it's why I took, like, most of the time if a celebrity dies or something, I'm just like, yeah, it sucks, it's tragic, whatever. When Robin Williams killed himself, I took that a whole lot harder, because he constantly was trying to improve other people's lives, meanwhile just falling deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole himself. And it's sad, but at the same time, it's like, look at all the laughs and joy he brought people. And when you look at the grand, like, weighing that scale, it's like, man, that's a win. Even though it's a tragic end to it, he was able to do something amazing while dealing with something that was amazingly awful, you know. And that's kind of, I think, my goal, you know, is like, well, if I'm going to deal with this, I'm going to see if I can help other people get through this also, you know. That way, at least I'm not alone, and this thing doesn't win, you know, like, no matter what, this doesn't win, you know.
That's, and that's one of the reasons why for you to finally start working towards those, you know, this is how I see it, because I share this with a lot of people that I work with, is they'll say, oh, well, life is good, you know, right now, why should I do this work? And I said, well, because that way you'll be ready when somebody comes to you for help. Yeah. You'll have, you know, like you going and taking care of business now and trying to make some improvements is going to make you even better and ready when somebody contacts you, you know, when that person does say, hey, you know, can you help me out with this? Yeah. And you're like, yeah, I can. Yeah. Because you've done some work and I can, it's one thing to commiserate with people, but it's another thing to actually give somebody, like, there's hope. Yeah. Like, it's this is how it used to be for me, and this is how it is today. Yeah. And I mean, that's different.
That's what I was telling somebody actually the other day. I was like, you know, one thing I found is this, is if you stand in place, you're never going to feel that there's any hope. You have to be moving. I'm using terminology from your show, a little different application, but you know, you have to be moving, because when you move, you know, you're going to affect your world. You know, when you just like, if you just every day you just lay in bed, ignore the world, don't do anything, nothing positive is going to come out of that. Like, you've given up, essentially. That's what I've been telling people, and I'm like, I know you're not processing it the way probably that I am, is that most people see giving up as committing suicide or of the like. But it isn't. Once you just go, I'm just going to lay in bed and I'm not going to do it, you've given up. It's just a matter of time before maybe you're not eating enough and you get sick, or you're not drinking. You know, like, something is going to happen. Nothing positive. You're not just going to all of a sudden... things don't just generally fall out of the sky positive wise, and all of a sudden your life's fantastic. It just doesn't really snap like that very often. It's super rare in life. Again, it's that fairy tale thing. And it's why, even if you are a person who puts a lot of weight into religion and stuff, you still, you know, just always remember this, and I'll say this, and I'm not going to quote things very often, but God helps those who help themselves. You know, you can't just lay around and get whatever. And I know this for a fact, because people are like, oh, you know, you just got to wait for things. And I'm like, okay, well, I've been dealing with this since I was 12. It hasn't gotten better from me really not doing much with it. So, yeah, it's time to face it head on. Yeah. Well, and that's, to me, one of the things I like to share about when I tell my story is, you know, me being the uber thinker, I used to always talk about, oh, well, there's no such thing as, you know, coincidences, because probability says that, you know, like, you know, like, hey, wow, look at you, small world. Who knows? You know, what are you doing here? Well, I didn't say small world to the 10,000 people I walked by that I didn't know, you know? And so I used to overanalyze it, right? And then when I finally, you know, saw with 2020 hindsight that, you know, wow, you know, when I opened myself up to a realm of possibilities of new things, like, all of a sudden I'm finding quote unquote coincidences. I'm finding
little epiphanies. All of these things are happening.
Yeah.
And somebody told me one day, and it's once again, it's a God thing, but the coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous.
Yeah.
All right. Well, even I can still go back to that old probability thing. The probability of me having some epiphanies, some moments of clarities, and some coincidences aren't really going to happen when I'm lying in bed by myself.
Right. Now, don't get me wrong. You can, because, laying in bed overthinking, I mean, at some point, if you throw enough at the wall,
something might stick.
Something may stick through the process. And I have been there where I've done that and gone, I have to do something different. Like, I have to, because, like I said, I was laying in bed one day and I was like, I'm giving up. Like, I am not trying in any way to fight this. I've just resigned myself that I've lost, basically. And it's like, I've got to get up and do something and start putting things into motion, or I have to accept that I've given up. I'm at that, again, moment of clarity, and it was a depressing one, but I was at that point that I was like, I've hit a crossroad.
That's a bottom.
And that's a bottom. Exactly.
I don't want to dig anymore.
Exactly. Now, I will say, I've been deeper, and that's part of, I think, why I recognized where I was, because I was like, this feels a whole lot like a long time ago when I, had some really awful thoughts. So it's like, I need to make changes here, or like I said, I need to accept that I've given up and quit putting weight on myself to not do anymore. Like, that's kind of what it is. Either way, I need to just accept. I have to accept that I'm making a change and start making changes, or I just have to accept that I've given up and give up. And just, that way I don't feel the pressure of the rest of it. And that's awful. I was like, that's not an option. That's just terrible. So, yeah. But yeah, if doing this and podcasting is really what it comes down to, if this is the way that I express my creativity and all that kind of stuff, I'm okay with that. I actually really like doing this. I like doing Salty Language. I like doing this show. I've had other ideas for shows in my head that I'd kind of like to do. And getting rid of some of the anxiety and stuff and depression would probably make those a lot easier, to where maybe I could go down that road. The only frustrating part about it is, that it's almost impossible to make any money doing this, to where you could rely on it for a living, and it does take a lot of time and work to put into it, so it's difficult to do more than one or two shows, especially if you are the driving force on a show. Like if you're talent on a show, it's much easier, where you just jump on a mic, and when you're done, you're done, and you're done, But the people who have to do, like if you're doing editing, or you have to do the social media work, or all this kind of stuff, and it's like, man, this is exhausting. It's so much work, but it is what it is. So
yeah, we never know what direction it's going to send us down. That's how I'm looking at things now.
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
Yeah, and there's been podcasts that they just come out of nowhere, like they drop what is that? Welcome to Night Vale or Nightingale or whatever it is. That it's kind of a weird kind of horror-ish type of thing.
Yeah, I
like
heard something about that.
Yeah, it's like a town where was it a town where like all the conspiracy theory stuff like is legit, and the town just kind of works around it, And I've heard it a couple of times. It's a really interesting show, and they just were like, yeah, we put a lot of work into it, and they dropped it, and it just exploded. Sometimes that happens, and I'm sure, they just released a book, which I'm sure they're going to make some money off of, and I'm sure they get people supporting them, and, it helps, but
yeah,
that's why I said, you never know. As creative people, you never know what you'll stumble into, and,
yeah.
You
might end up on the History Channel with a little Macho Man Through Time.
Right? wait till you hear the new one. Yeah, so it's been a good talk, though. We should probably wrap it up. We're pretty long
killed
here.
This one.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't mean to say kill.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So do you have any wins for the week, moments of clarity, moments of joy that you haven't already mentioned?
No, I pretty much started with it. It was getting to work and getting some of this clearing out some of the clutter, and I'm going to continue it tomorrow. I have a pile of my old, basically when I took my old studio apart, I saved all the building materials, and it's been sitting there for 3 years, and it's time for me to say, is this bringing me any use, and is it bringing me any pleasure? And the reality is it's not, and it's time to go to the dump and clear out some clutter. So that's my goal. I figure it's Angela talked about the fall being the season of mourning and whatever. You know what? Screw that. I'm looking at it as spring cleaning.
Yeah, I was going to say, because people look at it the other way, because most people kind of start, you're indoors more and you start shutting it down kind of versus the spring where it's usually like, hey, let's get outside, let's get moving, let's woo, and like you said, spring cleaning and getting the yard work going and all that stuff, so...
Yeah, I'm going to do a little George Costanza and take the opposite of everything tomorrow. That's what I got. How about you?
I don't really have a whole lot this week. It's, I'm excited for the weekend. We're doing a beer festival again, which
cool.
Which are always fun, and we're gonna have a 9-person group this year, which is the biggest that I remember us having. Big Dev from Snake Oil's joining us, and
nice.
That should be awesome. And it's really anxious about it, but again, no reason to be. Met everybody who's gonna be there. No, nothing new, whatever. I mean, it's just an idea of it's a place with thousands of people that, And then Sunday we're going to see Bill Burr, the comedian. Nice. And I know that's going to be a good time. So it's like, like I said, looking forward to it, but just my anxiety is just going crazy. So I've been trying all week to, focus on the breathing, do, what do you call it? I was going to say preventative, but it's not really preventative. It's just preemptive. That's the word I was looking for.
Prophylactic?
I don't think that's the right one either.
That's not it.
No. We'll just keep, where's the dictionary? We're just going to go through all of them. Just trying to do a little preemptive breathing to kind of keep my anxiety and stuff down, and that's kind of about the best I've got for the week.
Yeah.
So, before we get out of here, do you want to throw your plugs and where people can find you and all those kind of things?
Yeah, I'm at Ida Henno on Twitter and Henno Heiter on Facebook, and if you do have any problems or know anybody or anything having to do with, drug and alcohol problems, I am always here. I never had anybody in my life that I could ask this stuff about. Luckily I had a therapist that sent me in the right directions, but always feel free to contact me. And, we'd love it if you come check out Angela's awesome podcast. I call it our sister podcast to The Crazy Life.
Sure seems like it,
yeah, if you go to Angela's website, has everything. It's going to angelas.com. If you go there, her blog is there and the show is there. So
right, because you guys usually base the show off of the blog she posts before the show?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, with some exceptions, and that's how the show was basically born. It's like, hey, you already have a website and a blog.
Right, yeah.
Let's add a podcast.
Well, yeah, it's funny every time I hear somebody, was starting a podcast, and they're like, I was doing this and this, and I was like, I should just do a podcast. And it's like, yeah, actually, that's kind of how, that's really in the world we are, especially as a promotional engine. It's a pretty good tool for a lot of people. It's why comedians have embraced it so much. Because it's an awesome promo tool for them. The podcast fills the seats at their shows. That's the way they look at it, and it seems to work really well for a lot of them. Yep. So, it was awesome.
So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for stepping in, especially, again, last minute. So, I guess with that, I'll, I forgot to write down all the shenanigans from the show stuff. Let's see, you can reach out to Jen at Jen's Crazy Life on Twitter. You can hit the show at the Crazy Life Pod, or Crazy Life Pod, on Twitter. If you want to find me, I'm at Stunami. My other show is at salty_language or saltylanguage.com. Let's see, this show's website is the Crazy Life Podcast .weebly.com. Our email, if you want to reach out that way, is the Crazy Life Podcast @outlook.com. Am I forgetting something? I feel like I'm forgetting something. Well, we're part of the Tangent Bound Network and Wicked Radio Network. I think I nailed all those things. I think trying to make sure I got all the business out of the way. So I guess from that point, well, the opening song was done by our pal at Ida Heno, who you may have heard on this episode. And let's see. Then the last thing, obviously.
The more important thing.
The most important part of it, the part our lawyers make us put in. No, we're not therapists, doctors, trained professionals of any kind. We are people who have, we're just sharing our experiences. If you need professional help, please, 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 please seek out professional help. Or a support group or anything like that. Just, don't be alone. There's plenty out there. If you don't think you can afford something, a lot of areas do have some sort of help to get people to a therapist or with, get them help with mental health issues. And if you're feeling in a really dark and hopeless place, call the suicide hotline number if you need to, or there are other online support groups you can find for that kind of help. And like I've said before, whatever your mental health situation is, you probably, if you're a Reddit user, you can probably find a subreddit that has it. Like I said, I'm part of r/depression. I think I might be part of r/anxiety or r/mental health, something. I think I'm a member of like 3 or 4 of them. And there's a lot of people sharing really good coping mechanisms and stuff in there. So if nothing else, maybe give that a go. And yeah, I think that's it. I think I covered it all, right? Seems right.
Sounds good.
Yeah, if not, we'll put it in post. So until next week, Jen should be back and firing on all cylinders. And so until then, enjoy life, celebrate your wins, and we will see you next time.
Have a great week.
Hi, this is Mark. Congratulations, you have found this amazingly awesome show. Chances are you're listening to it right now on whether it's iTunes or Stitcher Radio or some other mobile app that allows you to stream this amazingly awesome show to your ear holes. And I can't stress how awesomely amazing this show really is. But did you know that you can also catch the latest episode of this show on the Tangibound Network? That's right. Go check out tangiboundnetwork.com. You can look them up, and you can listen to it right there. It's even mobile friendly. What more could you ask for? Which means you can pull it up on your iPhone or your Android, even your Windows phone. Yeah, who has one of those? But still, point remains, you can do it. You can do it. Check it out, tangiboundnetwork.com. Listen to this show, the latest episode, every time. Check it out.
Welcome to the Wicked Radio Network.